Hello, everybody. In case you are just tuning in now, this is Greg Zumak, Todd Johnson. We are Northside Bound. We are so thrilled to be doing this MLB Draft Day 1 live show. Let's get these links out for everybody in case you are just following along and haven't gotten it yet. But otherwise, Todd, tell me about it, man. How excited are you for the draft?
I'm pretty pumped right now. I think the Cubs are going to get they'll have a wide variety of players to pick from prep bats to college bats to high school pitchers to college pitchers, and we are going to have I think over the course of today and tomorrow, we're going to have a lot of good new players come into the system, and that'll probably contribute right away, especially at the college ranks. So I'm pretty pumped for not just tonight, but for tomorrow and Tuesday as well. You?
Well, I'm absolutely pumped. What I'm intrigued about is that we've seen the Cubs utilize a couple different strategies. And so what is this all going to look like? I don't really know yet. Are they going to go under slot? Are the Cubs going to go over slot even? Not sure. I'm really fascinated to kind of see how it all transpires there. But ultimately, I think that they're in a range that they should get a really good player, kind of like you mentioned, 2 tonight. That's what you would obviously hope. What is this going to look like as far as, the picks before this? I think that's what's really fascinating me.
Yeah.
And frankly, we don't have an answer to that. We will have an answer to it eventually as we go along today.
Yeah, I mean, you heard word this afternoon that Dylan Cruz's asking price was a bit too steep for the Pirates.
Yep.
And so they were thinking of going, either Max Clark or Walter Jenkins or even Wyatt Langford. So who knows what's going to happen. And then late in the afternoon, Joe Doyle, our friend over at Future Star Series, talked about briefly that Rhett Louder could slide down to the teens. So we're just going to have to see who's there and who the Cubs want to give a nice chunk of change to.
Yeah, I mean, so that's obviously always the question, right? And if you ever look at mocks and you're like, this is consensus, this is exactly what everybody has, I think there's a pretty good chance that that's not going to be, what works out for everybody. But it is interesting and it is exciting because if we start to see some movement up top, if we start to see some, deep cuts on stuff, and I think we will. I think we're going to see some deep cuts up there. Then ultimately, yeah, I mean, you may have a player like the one, Louder we talked about, and there might be an injury situation there. So, that's understandable that he's sliding, but I've started to see Kyle Teal get a little bit closer to the Cubs zone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a player that I've been told consistently for the last about 6 weeks that his range is about 3 to 9. That's it. And 3 may surprise some people, but I think he was very much an option in case like the 2 hitters at the top college, Cruz and Langford are off the board. And maybe Detroit is just dead set on a college hitter. Like, okay, then Teal's probably the, a really good option there. And I think that's ultimately kind of the big question is do we start to see some people fall a little bit more? So Kyle Teal is certainly an example. I'm excited to see what happens with that. I think ultimately, like what you talked about, though, the biggest question is 1-1, right? Like Dylan Cruz is basically the consensus. I would say most publications feel like, it's Dylan Cruz at the top. But his asking price is high, or at least his asking price for Pittsburgh, we'll say, is high.
That's funny.
And I just want to put it out there in case anybody from the Pittsburgh front office is listening. I will take a deep underslot. If you need somebody to get taken 1-1, I'm happy to take a deep underslot. Use that money the rest of the rounds. I'm a team player with regard to that. That is not a problem at all.
No, well, that's very gracious of you to step in such an emergency. So,
yeah, everybody says there's 5 options. I'm happy to give them a 6th. Hey, we are starting to see some folks pop on here, which is fantastic. I see 33 up at the top, but starting to see some folks in the comments. Drop in the comments, who do you want? the Cubs to take. I know we're a little far off on that yet, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But I think it's kind of fun to just hear everybody's perspectives on that. We'll go along. As we mentioned online, we're excited to have a few guests here. We're excited to have
Yeah.
the Brian Smith, Rich Biesterfield, member of Northside Bound, photographer extraordinaire, but also somebody that got an up close look at a lot of the prospects, and another person who dives super deep into the prospects, gets heavy into this stuff, and that is Down on the Farm. We'll introduce them a little bit later, but they do fantastic work. I primarily interact with them a little bit on Twitter, but put out some really, really good stuff out here. So, excited to have them on board. There's somebody that gets plugged in there. They've seen some of these prospects as well in person, which is always kind of a fun avenue there. So we have got it. I actually was just going to pull it up because I don't even have the draft going.
I do.
You do? Okay.
Tracker.
All right. Well, that's fantastic.
I don't have the TV on though.
That is all right. If anybody in the comments has anything interesting, I'm totally fine if people put spoilers on there. I would say the only thing is, if people really want to watch it live, that's fine too. But overall, I think it's a good time to jump in on things.
Yeah. Who is this Greg Hughes guy? Have you heard of him?
I have heard of him. He's normally the one that does a lot of our tech stuff. And so he's got two jokers up here trying to figure it out all in one evening. But yes, that is the Greg Huss, who does a fantastic job. He's got a great question for everybody. And before the picks start rolling in, who is your prediction for the Cubs selection? I dropped my mock earlier today. I could be totally off on it, but I'm going to go with John Glenn High School shortstop Colt Emerson. I know that caught a lot of people off guard, but I have heard that hey, he's got some fans and potentially some fans right in that range. And so it just kind of fit what I would view as part of the model that the Cubs would look at, which, you've got some age component, you've got the lefty hitting shortstop. I've seen enough athleticism that I think you run him out there short for a while, and maybe he sticks there. Moves really well laterally, a little bit better to his left than his right. Fairly strong arm, getting into some power, a great hit tool, really impressive way to address barrel and plane in different ways. So I've been pretty impressed with Colt Emerson. I've just felt like a good one to pop. We've seen the Cubs linked in a few different areas, but ultimately it should be exciting. All right, so
we had our first pick in.
We've had our first pick in, everybody, and my mock 3.0 is off to not a great start. But this is exciting stuff because this helps dictate a little bit more about what's going on. Everybody okay if I start talking about these things?
Yeah, the reason we said Greg Hughes was because that's what Crawley called him today on the Fly the W.
Did he?
Podcast.
That's actually really fantastic.
He's never going to live that down. I'm sorry, but every executive board meeting from here to eternity. So
that's fantastic. So we have Skenes starting us off, and this is exciting. Todd, what do you think about Skenes?
I think he is a generational type guy like Steven Strasburg.
Yep.
A lot of mechanical things going on there that is going to be the challenge for any pitching coach, but I don't see him spending too much time in the minors. I mean, why waste bullets, really? If you think about it, if he is going to be that good, he could probably be up next year at some point. Just have him go in, get used to being on the road this fall, don't pitch up, and then by the middle of next summer, he could be 1-1 starter for the Pirates and for the next 7 years, which would be scary for Cub fans.
So I think my big question, because everybody, if anybody's paid attention, and I would say a good number of the folks who are watching here probably saw the College World Series, they heard about Paul Skenes. I mean, if you're on an MLB draft live show, you're amongst friends and talking about this stuff. And so, I see the Rob Manfred walking to the podium here. But along with that, if we're talking Paul Skenes, obviously he really was on another level here, right? And the stuff was just so vicious. It's funny because I've had some folks ask if he's like the most pro-ready prospect in, I don't know, pick like a decade or whatever, like since Strasburg. I don't think he is. I don't think he's actually pro-ready for a rotation yet, and that is not a knock on Paul Skenes, because actually he's amazing. Like everybody else saw. I'm not saying anything, a shocker or a hot take here. Paul Skenes is really good. The way we look at pitching now is very different than the way we looked at pitching then. And what Paul Skenes primarily pitches off of is a very, very heavy elite sinker. That sinker is elite. And then that slider has a lot of horizontal movement in the opposite direction. And we've seen pitchers succeed with that profile, but it still feels like they need a little bit something extra. The changeup is pretty solid. It's all great stuff. Like it's really, really elite stuff. I think he needs a cutter. Mm-hmm. And I've actually been a big proponent of him adding a cutter. I think a good organization, Pittsburgh certainly has some guys who throw some pretty good cutters. I think that's a really, really good spot to be. And if he incorporates that, if he gets good, not to get too meta within the pitching development, but keeps it to about 1 to 3 inches of cut, playing off of that heavy sinker that's running in on right-handers and heavy slider running away from right-handers, then I think it's a really, really good fit. I'm getting some comments here from David West, who brought up a splitter. Absolutely, he could. I think that's fine. The changeup does play really well, but yeah. I mean, if you added a splitter to his profile, that's nasty. Not everybody can pick up on it, but yeah, frankly, I would be trying to incorporate a splitter on like most pitchers. There's not too many that wouldn't be good candidates in my mind, as long as they can pick up on it. But absolutely, something with a little bit of vertical drop, something that operates closer to that middle of the zone, but middle of the pitching zone. So it's kind of more direct. I think it'd be a really good fit.
Yeah. The splitter is kind of the pitch du jour, right. The slider was for a while, then the sweeper with more horizontal movement than vertical movement. And now the splitter, but hitters are going to adjust, but when you have crazy movement like Skenes does at 99, 100, 101, I don't care how good you are. If the ball's moving, it's very hard to hit.
Yeah, it's really nasty stuff. Yeah. And hey, so this is a perfect time. We can take a little bit of a segue, but we are joined with Rich Beasterfield, Beast22 on Twitter. I imagine most people are very familiar with Rich. If not, you've probably seen some of his awesome photography. But what is really exciting is that in addition to that, we had the pleasure of having Rich not only contribute to Northside Bound, he writes some really good articles about the happenings down in Arizona, but he also, since it was in Arizona, took a day at the MLB Draft Combine, and I'm so excited to hear some of Rich's thoughts on that. I'm very happy to bring him on. So Rich, if you're all ready, I'm going to add you to that stream, and if you're not, I can't hear you, so I'm adding you anyway. And he's here. So
welcome, Rich. Good to see you guys. Is this kind of like Christmas morning for you?
100%. Yes. Yes. This is Christmas morning. The whole actual day up to this was like almost antagonizing or agonizing how difficult, because it was really like the night before. Mm-hmm. But yes, I am so excited.
Well, welcome, Rich. This is your first one.
Yeah.
Cheers.
First. Cheers.
That's right.
With the Cubs cup. Got to have the Cubs cup.
There you go. That's perfect. So, Rich, as we're waiting for, it looks like Washington is still on the clock. I'm not seeing any picks being in, although, I wonder personally, Dylan Cruz, that's the one that I've been kind of leaning towards Washington taking.
Yeah.
I've been thinking that, I don't have inside information, so I don't want to speculate on signability, but I think there's enough chatter out there that I would say folks generally thought his representatives, who's a well-known agent, we will say, Scott Boras, has been kind of angling a little bit to get out of Pittsburgh and put it more in Washington. Washington has worked with some really fantastic, some big superstars, and so this seems like a good fit. So I'm very curious. It looks like the pick is in, and so we'll see if they go to that right away here. So, Rich, what did you think about? Did you get a chance to watch the College World Series? Anything about Paul Skenes or Dylan?
I didn't have the time. It was between shooting games out here and the combine and everything. I really didn't get a chance to see a whole lot, except I think I saw one of the the walk-off extra inning game.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
so that one I
Yeah.
didn't get to.
That one is exciting. Oh, man. All right.
Who'd they get?
Well, I'm hearing some different things here. No, I haven't heard anything yet. Nobody not asking around too much. And so I think I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff people are hearing. Most people are thinking Cruz. Although there's some really, really good info that now I'm still a little bit frustrated that I didn't go with it. But I will just put it out there that in mock 2.0, I pushed pretty hard to see if Kyle Teal might go 4 to the Rangers. And so I just want to throw it out there in case that happens to happen, because I've seen a couple people mention that there's some chatter on that. So I will not be gracious, and I will absolutely post the screenshot of mock 2.0 where I mentioned that. But that's okay. Who knows if that happens. So while we wait for this, in which I would say most people feel like it's still in Cruz, but we'll see. Could be some surprises. Rich, tell us a little bit about the MLB Draft Combine. What were your experiences? We'll get to like some of the people that really impressed you, but I'm really just interested to hear how your thoughts about the actual Combine went.
It was a lot of fun. I think I wrote about it in the article. It's like I really wasn't sure what to expect when I walked in, but you walk through the doors, and the first thing I see was Jim Callis and a bunch of other folks from the MLB crew set up on the concourse, and they're recapping and broadcasting live. And then worked my way down closer to the field, and TV crews all over the place. You had guys in the cage hitting, and for me, usually like if I'm going to a Cubs game, I know the system, so it's like, okay, I know who do I want to see. Here it was kind of like, I don't know who most of these guys are, but who starts looking impressive, who looks like a physical specimen that you really want to see and watch. And so there were a couple of those that jumped out right away. But I think one of the other nice things that they did too was I kind of compare it to like spring training. If you go to spring training, like around the Cubs, you've got the quad fields in the back, and you've got fields 1 and 2 where more of the major leaguers are. You kind of have to make a choice. Where do I want to go? Because there's going to be action all over the place. This was a little more single-threaded. So you had, first you had a group taking batting practice, you had a couple groups, and then you had some guys throwing their bullpens, but their bullpens were on the main field. Then you had guys taking drills, on the infield. You had some of the catchers doing some pop drills and things. You had outfielders. So you could see more of it, that the outfielders and the catchers overlapped a little bit. But otherwise, I was able to get to see most of the stuff. So you didn't have to make that, that tough choice of, do I want to see this guy or do I want to see that guy?
Yeah. Nice. So, I mean, so we have gotten confirmation. So this is LSU 1 and 2, which is very, very exciting. Paul Skenes, Dylan Cruz, that's super awesome. LSU is an amazing team. It was an amazing team to watch. I only got to see them very briefly in Omaha, but it was clear how dynamic they were. Not a surprise when they all won. I think that's really exciting. With this, we'll talk about 3 here in a little bit. I think that could be fun. But before we get into that, Rich, I'm curious about which players impressed you. Now, we may not hear all these names tonight. That's totally fine. Those certainly possible. But I'm very curious about, as you were in there, as you were really ingrained in the whole process, what guys were popping?
The first one that jumped out at me was Cole Carey. I think I saw him first in the cage, so he was hitting well. And then I see him out taking ground balls to short, and you could see he had a really good arm. Then all of a sudden I looked down and I was like, wait, this guy's in catcher's gear now. Then I saw him taking balls in the outfield, and the throws were all strong. Even as a catcher, I saw him just do very briefly some receiving. He looked good there. So just that versatility was super impressive. And then kind of reading some of the stats after I got home that MLB had collected, it was like, okay, my eyes weren't deceiving me. He definitely passed the eye test in addition to the stats test.
Yeah, that was the one guy I was going to ask you about. He reminds me, just his versatility reminds me of a favorite of yours and mine, and that's Bryce Windham, his ability to play several positions at a high level.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering, how did his swing look? As my dog tries to get my
Good contact. I don't recall the specifics from the reports, but I think he was hitting for some good power.
Okay.
Exit velocities I think were good as well. I was talking to somebody at the combine, and it sounded like preseason some of the scouts weren't super high on him, but that he'd really moved up, especially during the combine and I think leading up to that.
Yeah. I talked about him today in our 10 names to know for the second round, but I don't know if he's going to make it all the way to number 68, but he's a good one. Who else did you see that really caught your eye?
George, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce his last name right. Wakow. He's a Chicagoland area kid.
Downers Grove, baby. That's
and
right.
He kind of reminded me of, he's doing the James Triantos thing, so I thought of you, Greg.
Yep.
Where he reclassified, so he's not even 18 yet. But boy, in the cage, he was hitting some monster shots. And then in the outfield drills, coming up fiery, and the throws, I couldn't necessarily judge the accuracy, but just from the, it looked like he was making very good throws.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So, George Wolko, massive human being, like you saw. I mean, there were really a couple really massive human beings. One of them is one of my personal favorites, Brock Vandenberg, first baseman of Michigan State. Both of these guys are 6'7", and so this is like a different type of human being. Basically, this is a different species.
Right.
As somebody who's rocking the Ken Rosenthal physical comps, it is not. I am not anywhere near their level. Ooh, yes. I love it. Max Clark to Detroit. Max, congratulations, man. I am very excited for that. I think Max is a fantastic fit. I'm sorry, Rich. I'm going to jump in here if that's okay with
you're
you.
Good.
I want to get back to that discussion, but the big chatter in recent weeks is like, Max Clark, where is he going to go? Is somebody going to buy him down? I entered the season with him as my 1-1 guy over Dylan Cruz, and I backed off of that a little bit. He fell just slightly below that. Nothing against Max Clark. The biggest question was, is he going to get to power? And he started to. He's got all 5 tools. But the big question is, like, is somebody going to value this with so many really good college hitters? And Detroit is a good fit. I like that because Detroit values in their, I don't know their specific draft model, but if you look in their history, they value a long track record. And so usually people interpret that as college, but they also take, the high school guys, as long as they've got a long track record. And they've got a new president and they've got a new scouting director, but it's very much something that their scouting director, who used to be in San Diego, would have done. So yeah, I love this. I'm very excited. Obviously, I wanted him to get down to 13, but I didn't really think that was likely. And so without that in mind, at least he's not going to a division rival. Yeah. So
Max was at the combine, but he wasn't working out the day I saw him. So he was more doing interviews, doing some press, like some being interviewed by Jared Carabas out by the pool in Chase Field. And definitely he was a fan favorite. There were lots of people looking for him.
I could see that. Todd, totally jump back in with any thoughts you have on Max or other guys that you want Rich to chat about. And
did you see like a majority of college kids at the combine, or just kind of a mix?
It was a mix. It was kind of nice. They had, I'm gonna forget which colors went to which, but they had like 4 different colored T-shirts on, and then numbered. And so like two of the colors were high school, and 2 of the colors were college age.
Yeah.
So at least you could kind of get a sense after a little bit of where the age range, because I'm terrible at guessing age from just looking at guys' faces. Because like Waka was just graduated, but based on his size, I would have said he's a college junior.
Yeah. Did you attend both days or just one?
I just attended one. Funny story of how I actually found out about the combine. Chris Pasiola, our Cubs number 3 draft pick last year,
Yeah.
I was watching a game about a month or so ago, and I was talking with his family, and his mom, Jamie, happened to go, "Oh yeah, the combine's in Phoenix this year." So I'm like, of course, that raised my antenna. So, and then I lost track of it until I started seeing some of the press coming out on the first day. And by that time, I didn't have a chance to get there. But I'm like, okay, I'm going tomorrow. Definitely want to hit one day.
Well, I really enjoyed your article. It was fun to have kind of an inside look at the combine. And was there any kind of, I don't know if you watched a lot of pitchers. Was there some pitcher that stood out to you?
One that caught my eye was Cameron Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Especially when I heard, they kind of flashed some of the key information up on the scoreboard just briefly, and then it'd be gone. When I noticed he was from IMG Academy,
yeah,
knowing the Cubs' history, I definitely wanted to take a look at him. I mean, another large human, as you described him,
yeah.
Greg, but a big lefty. Seemed like he was pounding the zone really well. The pitchers, it seemed like, I don't know how many pitches they had him do, but it didn't seem like it was very long, so it was kind of hard to get a real sense. And I was trying to shoot photos, so they flashed a lot of the information up on the scoreboard. But as you know, Todd, probably it's kind of hard to do both at the same time when you're looking through a lens and then also trying to look at a scoreboard. You kind of one's going to suffer.
Yeah. It always. I mean, you're so focused on getting the shot, you're not paying attention to the game. So it's like there've been many times like the Riley Thompson no hitter in Clinton for the Midwest League champ. I was so busy focused on getting the picture that I didn't notice that he'd struck out 10 guys and hadn't allowed a hit. So it's a difficult challenge to go and watch something when you're photographing and then actually pay attention to what you're watching. It's two different things. All right. That is, I really enjoyed all those chats, and I'm a big fan of Cam Johnson. That would be, if the Cubs could get him, well, he might be like an overslot guy in the second round or an underslot guy in the first, but it's a little too high for him, I think. But that would be 3 straight lefties from IMG. That would be something else.
It kind of reminds me of the Old Dominion connection, which the Cubs have had, where you start kind of looking where it's like, where do they seem to have some really good.
Well, we also had the Michigan State reliever corps there for a few years too. So,
that's true.
Just saw Wyatt Langford to Texas.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I mean, a lot of that, obviously, people have been talking about Dylan Cruz versus Paul Skenes, and it, that was kind of a difference, hitter versus pitcher. That's kind of how two nearly generational guys or upper tier guys like that. And really, a lot of the conversation was probably geared towards Langford versus Cruz. And so I think we can share some of this data here, but looking at some of the data, as we kind of compare those two guys, not that it's only about that, but there's some little factors in there. So Langford actually has the edge on Cruz with a better contact rate. It's about 80%. He's got a chase rate of 21%, whereas Dylan Cruz is at 20% flat, give or take, some small percentage points. That's pretty close to even at that point. So neither one of them really chased the ball out of the zone. That's a pretty good chase rate. Langford makes better contact. And then as far as the exit velocities, that's where things start to differentiate a little bit. But Langford still sat at about a 90th percentile exit velocity of 107, or about 108, which is really good. And Cruz is about 109, nearly 110. And so you start to see a little bit more power. The other thing is that while both players are very fast, I'd say Dylan Cruz looked a lot more comfortable in center field. It doesn't mean that Langford couldn't play center field, but it wasn't comfortable towards the end of the season even. So it kind of depends on how Texas wants to run with it. But frankly, they're very similar players. That's an enormous value. I see Vandy, a good friend of Northside Bound. Appreciate you, Vandy, with Texas with the steal of the draft so far. And possibly, really to get that player at 4 who I would argue you could have justified taking 1-1 most years, even this year, especially with a little bit of a deal.
Yeah, this is the deepest class they've had in a while. I know there's talk of the first 4 top rated pitchers in this draft would be ranked higher than Cade Horton last year. So I mean, you have Louder, Dollander, Skenes, and
Waldrop.
Yeah.
Yep.
So to
Absolutely.
get one of those 4 would be good too. But this is a deep class. Even into, we're talking around 6 and 7. You're still going to get a really high quality player.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, Rich, I appreciate all of your time, man. It's fantastic. I hope you kind of jump back on with us and still keep listening. But again, you can find Rich Biesterfield on Twitter. You can find Beast22, which the handle is right there. Please do read his pieces at Northside Bound. I always check in on those because I'm consistently learning a bunch of stuff down in Arizona. He's always the first person I ask.
He's got one coming out tomorrow on the Arizona Rookie League recap. So look for that tomorrow, guys. It's always good.
It's going to be great. All right, Rich, you take care, my friend. Let's have a good draft. Oh, Absolutely. Here, hold on. Before you go, just total off the wall. Who do you think the Cubs take? Sorry, I'm going to do this to all of our guests. You're just the first victim. You can throw out any name. It's totally fine. Don't pick me. They won't pick me.
Oh, man. Now you caught me off guard with that.
Oh, I totally should have led you in with that. That's my fault. That is
Dollander.
All right, I love it. Chase Dollander. All right, there's your pick, Rich. I love it. I think that's totally fair. Thanks again for jumping on with us, and let's have a fantastic draft.
Absolutely. Right. See you guys.
Okay. Well, that was wonderful to hear Rich's thought.
Oh, yeah.
And Todd, I'm going to kick it to you. I want to hear what you think of the draft so far. What do you think is going to be, going on here? Not necessarily you have to make like a mock or anything, but I'm just curious about your thoughts as we've gotten 4 picks in.
Well, I think Walter Jenkins is the best available pick right now. But I think the draft for me really begins at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. As those teams, we're going to see guys fall. We could, there's rumors of Dollander to the A's at 6. But I'm not sure that those guys want to go full slot bonus. Because, I mean, if you take Kansas City, that's almost $6 million. And they have to offer 75%? Is that the amount they have to offer? Or you're muted.
What I was saying was so eliminating that I just turned off the mic. Yeah. But yes, so it's 75% if they completed the combine physical. And it looks like Walker Jenkins is pick 5. So we went fairly chalky, all things considered, for the top 5. There were 5 really quality players. Yeah. And so, but getting back to what you were saying, they have to offer 75% if they went to the combine and did the physical. Yes. A quick note that players opted in ahead of time, whether they knew they were going to be able to make it or not. So what that means is the players playing in the College World Series, but they still opted in, were still eligible for that. So, it's not like Dylan Cruz wasn't eligible for it because he was playing in Omaha. He actually did not opt in because he didn't need to, I guess.
Yeah, I think the draft, as Ray Rarden is saying right now, he wants the A's to get a college hitter, but it'll be interesting to see if they go with Dollander here, and it'll be even more interesting to see how much they end up giving him, because he was, right up there with Skenes and Cruz at the beginning of the year and slipped a little. He didn't have the greatest of years. So my ADHD is in full effect as I fidget here all the time. But we're looking at the huge impact on the Cubs are the next 6 picks. So what Kansas City and Colorado and the Marlins do is really going to affect who the Cubs have to select from. And that's really the big thing, is who is at the top of their board when the 13th pick arrives. Is it going to be Hurston Waldrop? Is it going to be Colin Houck? Could it be maybe my guy, Brock Wilken? But I don't think Brock's going to go that high. I think Brock will probably be late teens. I don't think the Cubs are going to go take a chance on him, even though I just love that bat. I just love it. But I'm thinking that if the A's don't pick Dollander and they pick a college hitter, it'll be interesting to see who they go with, because they probably want someone that's going to be more ready for that ballpark when they get to Las Vegas, when their contract at the Coliseum runs out. So that'll be interesting to see who they go with there.
It's really interesting because there's a lot of chatter today. And so you have to take all the chatter, like all the news reports, all the discussion points with a grain of salt, right? Because we've got teams that are trying to get information out there. And it's not like these reporters are intentionally misleading anything or making up stuff. It's more just like, hey, let's say you are, I don't know, let's say you're the Reds. You want information to be trickling out about some of these guys up top to hopefully get a chance to fall down to you. Like that's just a strategy. Now, clearly that didn't really happen. But I mean, with where we are, top 5 picks, I had somebody that follows along with us say draft starts now after the first 5 picks. And I think that's very, very fair.
Joe Doyle, our friend over at Future Star Series, just reported that they're going with Grand Canyon Antelope shortstop Jacob Wilson.
I am good with that. I am very happy that he is. I have no issue whatsoever with Jacob Wilson. He's just not my favorite type of profile. I think he's going to be a darn good player.
Oh yeah.
But I just was a little uneasy that the Cubs might see some value sitting there at 13 and be like, hey, this guy's probably like a top 10 pick.
Yeah, Cubs are going to have the way this draft is falling now. I mean, this is really when it kicks in for me, is right here at with Cincinnati and Kansas City. This is where we see if the cheapskates start to come out, or if they're going to go pick guys that are at the top of the board.
Yep. So with that, draft starts now, and we're certainly getting into pick 6. We're talking about Jacob Wilson, but we are also going to bring along friend of Northside Bound, fantastic Cubs prospect writer, very good draft content as well, and that's Brian Smith. Of course, you likely know him as Cubs Prospects, and I've seen many of his pieces at Bleacher Nation, which is fantastic. But Brian, welcome aboard, my friend.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi. Ciao.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I'm still getting used to like American time, everything, but happy to jump in here right as the draft started to throw us our first curveball, huh?
Yeah. So what the fans don't know is that Brian, he told you he was in Italy. So we actually offered to send the Northside Bound jet out to get him, but Brett already had one waiting on the tarmac for him, so they sent him back for that. So we're happy to welcome you here.
Yes, I'm happy to be back. The jet was amazing, and just sprawled out across 3 seats, and couldn't have gone better.
Yeah, well, fantastic. So, Brian, tell us a little bit about what you think about the draft so far. We will ask you for your Cubs pick at the end. I totally did not lead Rich in with that before. So, but just a heads up on that. But what are your thoughts on the draft so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how all the rumors that you hear about how, what the directions that these teams at the top are going to go. And then it just sort of falls into place with like this draft was very clearly, I thought, like everybody agreed there's 5 guys at the top, and it is kind of nice when the draft does go that way, because so often in baseball it gets muddled up by bonus demands and draft pool strategy and things like that. It's kind of nice when it actually feels like, a basketball or football draft where it's like, okay, the top guys are going. And now I think it's when it gets interesting, mostly because I think you can rank 6 through 25 in about 18, 20 different ways and be totally valid. So I really like that part of the draft. I think it's going to be amazing to look back on this draft in particular in like 5-7 years and really be able to tell like the scouting departments that had it together and the ones that were a little behind.
Well, absolutely. So let's say you're picking 1-1. Yeah. We'll just go with it doesn't even matter which team it is, but who would you have gone with in this draft? Because we've got a couple generational guys here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go Dylan Cruz. I just think the the odds of that working are just so high that, you know, if Skenes ends up the better player, I wouldn't be shocked. But he also just there's a larger percentage of outcomes, honestly, probably by a factor of 3 to 5, where it's drastically the other direction. So yeah, I think Dylan Cruz was the best pick. I'm happy that a Cub rival didn't go that direction, but it's also going to be terrifying to face Skenes the handful of times a year the Cubs will have to.
Do you see the next 5 picks just being kind of random at best?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. I mean, I think this is a draft where it's like every team is going to value different things, and they're going to have different part of players, a player's skill set that appeals to them. The A's probably, for example, really liked what Jacob Wilson was willing to take as a bonus ask, in addition to having some fantastic defensive qualities and things like that. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I bet you will hear that a player goes 7 or 8 and other teams didn't have him ranked in their top 20. It's just sort of the nature of this year's draft in particular. And I think what that means is the Cubs are going to have a couple pretty good options available to them.
Yeah, we've seen that kind of happen, like with when the Red Sox took Nick York a couple of years ago, and now he's not that far from the majors and one of their top prospects. So is there someone like that you see for the Cubs, or do you think they kind of go with their standard best person available?
I think this is a draft where it really makes sense to go below slot in the first round, because I think you can stack up those players that we talked about, maybe the players who were 15th through 25th ranked, and you can just go down the line and call their advisors and say, $4 million, will he take it? Next $4 million, will he take it? The Cubs probably have a pretty darn good idea of who will be willing to take that kind of number. And if the player that is willing to do it is sort of right next to the player they might deem the best available, but he wants $5 million, I would think that this is a good year to go the $4 million route, because there's going to be a really good player in the third round that you could go snag for almost $2 million if you do that.
Yeah, I really like that. So with that in mind, not that we know who's going to be on the board, but who are some examples of players that you think would be if you're going to cut a deal,
right,
this would be the type of guy that I'd like to get. And certainly we can talk about names too.
Yeah, man. What's most interesting to me is whether there's if Matt Shaw or Tommy Troy, if they blink at the last second, if they get offered $4 million and they're not feeling a real strong promise, or maybe it's 4.3 million or 4.4 million. That to me is the really exciting possibility. Can Kantrovitz really work it in the room, really try to sell these guys on hey, we don't know if there's a home for you for another 6 or 7 picks. Will you take this number? And at the last second, I think that's what happened with Paul Skenes, right? Is the Pirates just said, we might take Langford. We might take Langford. Will you accept whatever the number ends up being, 9 million, 9.5 million, whatever. Yeah. And at the last second,
I think, yeah.
Okay. At the last second, Skenes, he blinked, I think. And it would be really interesting to me if one of those infielders does, because I think those are really fantastic players worthy of being picked 13. But I don't know. You tell me who would definitely be willing to take $4 million.
Well, I don't want to jump in and say who would.
Brock, wait! This just in. Brock Wilken.
Brock Wilken. All right.
Yeah.
All right. That's fair. So we did have a little bit of a surprise here, just based on how things were chatter, which we kind of teased this a little bit, hey, this guy's got issues. This guy's got issues. We want this out into the media, so he falls to us at 7. And that's Rhett Louder, who, there's a lot of chatter earlier today of oh, he's got a really bad elbow injury. He's going to fall. He's going to make it down to the bottom of the first round. And then, Cincinnati takes him. So I'm not saying anything nefarious or that they leaked any reports. Maybe they just saw value here in taking. I would say he's the most complete pro-ready pitcher in the draft.
Louder went to the Reds.
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about Rhett Louder, we talk about a pro development system that that Wake Forest is fantastic. They're a pro level system. I mean, there are news articles written about how good they are, and I will avoid names, but there are prominent members that worked with that department that are now prominent members of MLB organizations. So certainly, Rhett Louder going to Cincinnati will be a little bit annoying. We've got 2 really good pitchers added to the NL Central that we'll have to deal with down the line.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you say, Greg, that's like the most drive line-y like program in college baseball? And now he's going to an organization that employed the founder of Driveline for a couple of years. So there's a real connection to modern baseball there.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think that's a fantastic point. And there's not much you need to do with Rhett Louder. Like he kind of is what he is. Now I think there's sequencing things you can do and probably make some adjustments here or there. But basically, he's pretty close to ready and is probably going to pitch in Double-A next year or something. And so that'll be interesting. Going back to the guys that are maybe somebody that could take a cut. I think you brought up like Tommy Troy, Matt Shaw. Both those guys make a lot of sense. I like some of the high school infielders that there's just a lot of high school infielders. So it's going to be a bit of a like eye of the beholder. So you might have somebody like I threw out Emerson. I have no idea what his signability is, but he may say, look, we've got maybe Cubs, maybe Boston, but then might have to go all the way down to Cleveland at 23. And so is he just lock in at 4? Like done. I don't know. I don't know what that will be, but that would be something that would intrigue me. The name that's been bouncing around a lot, and I think it's worth discussion. I'm interested in your thoughts, Brian, and that's Nolan Schonnel, the first baseman for FAU, who I would say that there's a good amount of chatter that he could play other positions, but generally think about him as a first baseman a little bit more. Curious to hear your thoughts, Todd. Your thoughts on if that was the pick for a haircut at 13.
Yeah, Todd, you go first. I want to hear, especially with how much you like Brock Wilken. I want to hear how you stack those 2 up against each other.
Well, I think Wilken has much more experience against better competition playing in the ACC. But he has a big, powerful bat, whereas as Nolan, I'm still kind of new to. It's only within the last month that I've gotten to know his swing a little bit. And I'm not big on comps, but he not only can hit for power, he can also hit for average. But for me, Wilken, I've been on since March, and I'm not really sure why he hasn't risen, whereas as Nolan has. And I don't understand the difference, whereas Wilken plays at one of the elite programs in the country. And I'm flabbergasted as to why Nolan has risen up. So I need questions answered on that, because he could be a guy at number 13 who would take $4 million.
So I'll interject there because I was not doing that at what Todd was saying. So just like I was not going back on that. But we did get Blake Mitchell, which has been rumored to the Royals. Sounds like that's going to be the deal. We wrote about it in our mock as that was a potential option. Him and Dylan Head is kind of like a package deal, so to speak. I went with Head for the ultimate mock, but with the plan of both of those guys getting effectively, if you take their top 2 rounds and then just split the money in half, and like that is a potential possibility there. And one of the benefits is like Dylan Head is not eligible for the 75% rule, and so like that. And I have to look really quickly if Mitchell was, but expect like a kind of a deeper haircut on that when I say that's a decreased signing bonus there, but that's an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the way this is shaping up, I really wonder if Chase Dollander from Tennessee is dropping, and I think that's going to be a hard player for the Cubs to pass on. I think they would be willing to go, full slot, maybe even to 5, or I don't know, maybe it'll even take a little more than that. Like that is a guy I think in the room people will be pounding the table for, and whether they deviate from their strategy going in to do that would be really interesting. But yeah, that's the name through these 8 picks that now, like, the rumors that he might fall as far as them makes it really interesting.
Yeah, Kyle Teal's still available.
Yep.
Available. and Noblemeyer, and then Dollander are the top 3 rated on MLB Pipeline and still available at this point. But I don't, like I said earlier, I have no idea where these next few teams are going to pick. It's just crazy as to who could go where and when.
Yeah,
Blake Mitchell feels like such a Royals pick, doesn't it? Like just just check so many boxes for them that they really value in guys. And I don't know. I think I could see him being highly successful there, but really, really interesting gamble for them with some sure bets on the board still.
Absolutely. The high school catching track record, which we have some comments in the chat, but it's just not good. It's just not a good track record for high school catchers. That being said, some of them work out. And when you get that kind of a value out of it, it's hard to separate, and it's not a surprise exactly what Brian is saying. It's the scouting heavy teams versus the model heavy teams. Every team uses a model. How much they weigh that is going to be very, very different from like an organization like Baltimore all the way down to, I would say, honestly, Colorado or Kansas City would be the ones that would immediately jump out as more of a scouting heavy team, especially Kansas City. So yeah, I think that you look at the player in front of you and you're just like, I believe this guy. This is our guy.
Can I say that my favorite thing in draft writing at the moment is if a player is young for his class, the writer is legally mandated by baseball rules right now to say, which may appeal to model-friendly teams.
Model-friendly teams, yes.
Well, Joe Doyle just reported that the Rockies are selecting Chase Dollander.
All right, well,
that makes sense.
That fits them too. Yeah, That was okay.
So now, Kyle Teal now, I guess, is the, I asked you, Greg, but 2 hours ago, if Teal were to somehow fall, is that a guy the Cubs would be interested in? Because, we certainly know the Cubs highly value their area scout in Virginia. Probably the guy in the room that has the most respect just from everybody across the board. And if he's like really on board for Kyle and he's there, it's sort of hard to imagine that not being the pick. But I don't know how he feels.
Yeah, exactly. And so the area scout that we're talking about, I think we can mention that here, but that is ace scout Billy Swoop. I don't think ace is technically in his job title, but I would lump it in there. This is a man that has been with the organization for years and years. This is not a Theo hire. This is somebody that predated Theo by a good portion. Mm-hmm. A lot of the names in the Cubs organization have a deep connection with Billy Swoop, both on a personal and obviously a professional level. And so, you've got guys that outside of the late, great Stan Zielinski, I would say that Billy Swoop has had some of the biggest impact in the organization. Maybe that's out of line for me to say, but I think he's had a big impact on the organization.
Yep.
This draft is going a little bit quicker than we thought it would. I mean, we're already at number 10.
It is. I mean, I would like to say that I think people are effectively seeing who's on the board and metaphorically or maybe literally like rushing to the podium. It's maybe hard to get Rob Manfred to walk faster, but like they're really getting really cooking. So this is exciting. I think we're talking about Nolan Schonel, which is probably still worth revisiting here. Not to get too heavy into the Kyle Teal thing, which could be very exciting. But I think that this is another play to revisit. So I apologize if I'm cutting anybody off, even though we've been jumping in on stuff here. But a couple things with respect to data. So we have some data here on Nolan Schonel. He's a guy with we talked about Cruz at 75% contact rate, Wyatt Langford at 80%, which is slightly above average. Towards the plus or even a little bit better side is Nolan Schonel at 87%. That's not the end all be all. Jacob Wilson was a 92.5% or so. So, that's not the only thing you look for, but then also doesn't chase the ball. And so he a 19% chase rate, which is right in that Wyatt Langford, Dylan Cruz line. And the 90% exit velocity is right about the same as Wyatt Langford as well. he's probably more of a first baseman, at best left fielder. And so that kind of knocks him down a little bit. But I think when you can be in the conversation with those guys, didn't face the same level of competition, but you feel pretty good about that.
And that swing in particular, I mean, I think you see some stuff like scouting wise that really validates those numbers. The swing he has, which is really unique, sticks the bat sort of straight up real high, and then takes a really big step forward, which is just a pure timing mechanism move. And if you're going to use a timing mechanism like that and not get beat on, on being caught too out in front of the ball sometimes and things like that, that really shows that you have A, really good hand-eye coordination, and B, that you can really let the ball travel far and still impact the ball in a big way. So I think the Cubs, are very likely to see some of that stuff and really like it. I think with a player like that, with a unique swing, like we know they go into those Zoom meetings and they have like, Justin Stone on the hitting side and Craig Breslow on the pitching side really go deep into it with those players. So, as we talk about Nolan, the most important thing that's happened behind the scenes in the last month probably is Nolan and Justin talking about hitting, and where Justin came out and landed on Nolan's swing, especially after talking to him and hearing how he got there, is really going to, I think, inform what the Cubs do as it relates to him.
Interesting.
Because, I think the Cubs the trust they have in Justin and Craig, not only to I think involve them in those meetings, but to really have them lead those meetings. We've heard that from the guys they've drafted in the past. I think it really speaks to the development department that they've set up and the trust they have in those processes, that, hitting and pitching are like those unique paths, and those two gentlemen are in charge of sort of leading the direction of those paths.
Yeah, I agree. So we were getting a little bit of information. I hearing this name. This is a name that I've heard really connected to the Marlins is Noble Meyer. That sounds right. That would make a lot of sense. So I haven't heard that confirmed by anything, but that conceptually would make a lot of sense. We've heard they're very, very interested. I will say I had somebody who I respect their opinion pretty deeply was like, this is it. Like that's their, outside of something insane, they're like, they are in.
Yeah,
and
Joe Doyle tweeted it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Todd.
Joe Doyle tweeted it.
Excellent. Well, then I feel great about it. So yeah, sounds like Noble Meyer to the Marlins. And so we start kind of checking down on the list. We've got Braden Taylor, who talked about a college, ready kind of infielder. You don't draft for need, but he does play third base. And I thought he was very technically sound. He looked really good. If we want to talk about Braden Taylor really quick, super patient, to the point that I think in pro ball, you even do want him to get more aggressive on those 0-0 fastballs. It's like if it's slightly out, won't swing at all. And there's going to probably be some low A, high A umpires, no disrespect to that group of individuals, who is going to ring him up on a pitch that was outside, and he's going to probably need to be a little bit more aggressive. So
Say a Suzuki light there, right?
Say a Suzuki light. You have very similar kind of method where you're just like, be more aggressive. Honestly, James Triantos has done a really great job not chasing. Now you almost even want to get him back there to, I'm not going to have a telecast without talking about James Triantos. But you want to get back into it, like hunt those 0-0 fastballs, 0-1 fastballs even. And so that kind of thing. So you've got Braden Taylor, you've got big fan of this player, full count Tommy Cook is a big fan of Tommy Troy, who is also another player who should probably go somewhere in that range. I'm a little bit lighter on Tommy Troy, but would be a great pick on that. And obviously Kyle Teal, who's very, very exciting. And then you start getting into some of the high school players. So I think we're sitting there potentially pretty good. For anybody keeping track, we are still probably one of the big four type of arms is still on the board. And that would be Hurst and Waltrip, which could be possible there at 13. And honestly, I think if the Cubs take him, I would be very interested about that development plan. I'm very intrigued by that if that happens to happen. Otherwise, I think we've got some other good players on the board too.
Yeah, it's interesting. When Jason McLeod was the scouting director for the Cubs, you always felt like if a guy did good in the Cape Cod League the previous summer, he was high on the Cubs board. If Hurston Waldrop's the pick, we're gonna know every time a player is good in Omaha, we're gonna have to take that guy super seriously from now on, because it would be just like Cade Horton the year before.
USA baseball experience, Cape Cod League, those were 2 boxes.
Yeah. I mean, if it was Jason still in charge, I think we'd be like, it's either Matt Shaw or Tommy Troy for sure, just based on
100%.
how they were last year in the Cape.
I would have locked in Matt Shaw months ago. Like, that would have been my no doubt pick. A guy who plays infield. Possibly, I'm the lightest on Matt Shaw about the chances of him playing infield.
Really?
Yeah. Why? Or
no? I just said really.
Yeah, and it's related. I think they need to overhaul his throwing motion. He throws just like Ian Happ. Now, that's totally possible. Great bat, though. Like, I don't want to discount it. If they took Matt Shaw, it'd be like, all right, awesome. Like, that guy is, they can work with him on his throwing motion. He's got athleticism. But yeah, if this was a Jason McLeod pick, no, again, not calling out Jason McLeod, but I would have locked in Matt Shaw ages ago. So interesting.
I think I'm Tommy Troy among the college infielders. I think I would have him first. I believe in the power with Tommy more than I do with Matt, just mostly from watching video and sort of how he gets into the power. But I really like that, he has it to the right center gap too. It comes to all fields, and I think he sticks on the dirt. I don't, obviously not at shortstop, I think, but a guy that I think could make sense at second or third. I think he'll have enough offense for both. So if they're going to go the college infielder route, I'll be hoping for him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We can't let you go without your pick. Now you have a little bit of a closer window. There's less players on the board. And so if you wanted to pick Dylan Cruz, I'm sorry, he's not available. But if you had to pick right now who you think, and we won't hold you to it, maybe we will, who the Cubs picking at 13?
I think that Matt Shaw is going to be the pick.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. Or maybe a few other places too, but I like it. So Matt Shaw, that's Brian Smith's Cubs pick.
And I'll say I'm going to guess $4.5 million.
Okay. I like it. Save 300 off slot. I like that's good. Yep. All right. Well, Brian, thank you very much.
Hey, you guys are doing great. I'm excited to watch in the next half hour hear the breakdown of our newest Cubs prospect. Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, man, it might be like 10 minutes. I don't know. They're going fast. So awesome. Well, thanks you, guys. Brian. Appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah, this is flying. So I'm looking to see if Joe has put anything up lately, and he has not. So.
Yep. So let's recap maybe some players on the board that are still here. Obviously, we talked about Kyle Teal. We've Braden Taylor, Matt Shaw, Tommy Troy. I'm seeing Jacob Gonzalez as well, which is a fantastic point.
Yeah.
And I think we have some players here who it's been fairly college heavy. Like Noble Myers, a high schooler, obviously that Clark and Jenkins isn't a huge surprise there. But I would say it's generally been pretty college heavy. And part of that is, and Todd, you and I have probably talked about this separately, but I don't know that we've talked about this yet tonight, is that a lot of it is likely due to the depth of the high school or the college class, in part because of the 2020 COVID season. We saw so many players then go to college because, it's a shorter draft. We're talking 5 rounds. There's less ability to move money around. Mm-hmm. And so you had a bunch of folks go to college, try their hand there. The NIL money certainly didn't hurt later on, of course. And so now we got this really deep set of college groups. And it's probably not a huge surprise that some of these names are still on there. But obviously you're a Wilkin guy, totally, love that. But who else are you thinking here that might make a lot of sense?
Well, I think Jacob Gonzalez does. Braden Taylor does. Aiden Miller's still available. I think he does. Colin Houck does. Arjun Namala also makes sense. So I mean, those are 4 really good picks. I think Waldrop is a name that some people are a little averse to because it would be another pitcher, and I don't really get that because Horton has been fantastic this year. Jordan Wicks is already at AAA, and I think some people kind of focus in on ERAs in the minor leagues when really guys are working on stuff in games. And so if you see somebody get shelled, so well, I was just working on my curveball, or I was working on a new grip. But I think Waldrop is definitely a possibility for me. I think Wilkin is kind of a pipe dream and a long shot, but he would be a good underslot one. But no, I guess Nolan just went to the Angels. So
Yep, he did. So with that, I'm going to jump right in because we are joined by the great Down on the Farm, who I've had such a good time interacting with. I think he does a great job covering the draft, covering the minor leagues in general. Though, I will see some Cubs spin every once in a while, but just in general, and I think does a really good job. So let me add you to it here. And welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
How are we doing, guys?
What's up, Vinny?
Doing well. I
know. This draft is really flying by. Like, I don't remember one in the past going this quick. It is boom, boom, boom. We're getting some action.
They're flying, and to the point that it's almost definite that you're going to be on the call, while the pick is happening. So I'm going to jump right in. It's normally the question we've been asking later, but I want to jump in so we don't spoil it later. Who would you pick, or who do you think the Cubs pick?
Well, before the season going into last month, I would have said Kyle Teal because personally I saw him when he was at Notre Dame. Cubs had multiple scouts in attendance both days. So I saw a lot of chatter around Kyle Teal there. It looks like he's going to fall to us. The Diamondbacks just took Tommy Troy, according to Joe Doyle.
Yep. All right.
I think he's really in play here.
We're up.
He fits the Cubs, mold for a hitter. He's, left-handed batter, hard, consistent contact. He's very good behind the plate. If we didn't have like a Wyatt Langford and a Paul Skenes and a Dylan Cruz this year, like he could easily be in conversation for a 1-1. Like he has that kind of upside to him. So he is who I'm going for. That's who I'm hoping for. Tommy Troy has been rumored there too. Hurston Waldrop got a lot of steam yesterday. So he would be probably the most interesting pick I think the Cubs could do because they would be able to get him for underslot. And then I think he has a lot of upside, especially with his 3-pitch mix. And we haven't seen the Cubs really attack a guy with the kind of arsenal he has yet, especially developmentally wise. So that's really interesting. I want to see how they handle that. But yeah, there's a lot of good options. There's good prep still there. Aiden Miller's still there. He's really good besides the Hammett bone concerns, but it's gonna be an interesting pick.
Yeah. This is exciting. I mean, at this point people are gonna freak out if it's not Kyle Teal. And I don't know that that's necessarily fair. I think Kyle Teal is really good. This is about where he was projected before. But he hit really well. We're talking about an 82% contact rate. So, that's kind of in that middle range between Langford and Schonnel. Obviously he plays catcher, so that's a big deal. And evaluating offense also goes into play with there's a lot of soft skills that the Cubs really value from the catching position. So that's going to be really, really tricky, but also, and it's just really hard to judge on that. Chases the ball at about 22%, which is still below average, which is good. That's what you want. And then that 90% exit velocity is about 105, which is right in line with some of those other kind of premier hitters. So we're talking about a guy who's got some offense. Obviously, he plays a really valuable position at catcher. How teams are going to feel about that is going to be different. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with the folks in the chat and Vinny, and just that this is a really good position that the Cubs are in. Very, very good position.
Yeah, I was not expecting anything like that, especially when the Louder news came out. It really threw everything into shambles. We you pretty much knew once you got past 5, it was going to be a toss-up. Like the Mitchell pick, I love Blake Mitchell. I would have never thought he was going to go to Kansas City.
Oh, no. He is not.
Sorry, go ahead, Todd. Go ahead.
I thought they would go for a guy for less value that they could sign immediately rather than pay full slot. So
Yeah.
that the actual signing, not necessarily the pick itself, but the strategy involved is what the Royals do. So I'm waiting for Joe to pop in here.
I know.
Oh,
So we've got Troy, we've got, we throw out some of the high school infielders I think could be really good fits here. If they go Waldrop, I honestly, I'd feel really confident in that development plan. I might be a little biased there. But I'd be really intrigued with that situation. So I do, everybody, like, regardless, just hold on, don't freak out if it's not, let's say like Kyle Teal. Braden Taylor, I think, makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah.
I think they are set up in a really good spot. I'd be a little surprised if they took a Cade Horton-esque deep pick, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be. We've heard some guys that have really, really impressed at workouts with the Cubs and workouts around out there. So, I think it's good. This is exciting. This is very, very exciting.
And another name that I wasn't expecting to still be on the board with Colin Houck either. That was a lot of steam around him and the Diamondbacks too. So for him to slip, he's another interesting prep bat that's sitting there too that could easily be an option.
Yep. So we'll see. We've talked about Shaw, and I'm seeing something in the chat that Eric Longenhagen, who's been pretty good. I mean, he's obviously got a great track record of saying Shaw here. If that's Shaw, I mean, I've had conversations with folks that like he is somebody that could have gone in the top 10 pretty easily, actually. I would say most years, and was enormous value. I comped him to a right-handed hitting Ian Happ, and it looks like
Joe Doyle just confirmed it's Matt Shaw.
All right. I saw him live. He was fantastic in Omaha, not at the College World Series, but the Big Ten Championship. And my only thing with Matt Shaw is just where does he play? And if they feel really good that he's actually an infielder, then honestly, like, I feel really good about this. Great offensive profile. So diving into the data, if we can here, let me pull it up. So when we talk about Shaw, there's a few things. Again, that 81% contact rate. The chase rate's a smidge higher. It's about average. 25% is about college average for, the guys you're generally looking at. And so it's a smidge higher than I'd like, but really good power. And when we talk about the type of player, this is somebody that is lining up on the infield. They're, that's what we're thinking, right? Like, that's generally what it is. I imagine they're going to announce him as a shortstop. That would be my guess. And if that's the case, like, he does a lot of the things like Ian Happ does. Ian Happ is a really good pick at pick 9. So they pick him at 13. They get that kind of a value. If we're going to go back to what Brian Smith said, hopefully a little bit of a haircut here. I think that there's enough people on the board that you can probably ask him or basically say, like, hey, there's a lot of people. First one to 4, 4.2, 4.3 is our guy. And I think this is potentially a possibility here. A little bit of a discount. So, look at that. Matt Shaw confirmed. Not that we didn't trust Joe Doyle and co, but it's announced on the broadcast, so there's no going back now. They announced him as a second baseman, which I do think it does matter. I think that gives you a little bit of the view and the profile there. We have seen players, throw with that kind of emotion. We saw that's how Ian Happ started a lot of his games early in the minor leagues as well as the second baseman. I think Joe Madden was still throwing him out there at second base occasionally too. I think he threw him at shortstop a couple times and third base. There's the play. If you're watching it if you are watching on TV, watching ESPN as well, there is a play that we will link to that is one of the best plays I have ever seen. I got to watch it at the Big Ten Championship, where as a shortstop, Matt Shaw, not one of the Doctor Who actors, but Matt Shaw ran into the outfield to make this like incredible acrobatic diving play And it was just really, really beautiful to watch. The folks in the press box let out an audible like, "Oh," like when that happened, which generally they don't do. Very exciting stuff. So,
Yeah,
Vinny,
I
what do
mean,
you think? What do you think?
I think we're looking at a professional hitter here.
Yep.
Is what we're looking at. And whether he plays wherever he plays, it's the bat is going to play, and that's of most importance. They can figure out where to play him later, not necessarily today. But I mean, we're talking about a guy who's had success track record in wooden bat leagues, and that above all else, that plays and that experience to drive the ball, be patient, take walks. His approach at the plate had to impress the heck out of the Cubs.
I agree. Vinny, what do you think about the pick here?
Yeah, when I started hearing the name rumored today, I went back and started watching a lot of video on him. He's really compact with his swing, which I really like a lot because even for him being a smaller infielder, he has some thump behind his bat. Like, he's a very diverse hitter. He can, he's not afraid to pull the ball. He's not afraid to go oppo. I think really the big question mark with him is, where does he end up in the infield at the end? Or if, he does move to the outfield, where does he end up there? But yeah, we got like one of the most consistent professional hitters in this draft once you pass the top 3 at 13. And we've seen the Cubs do very well with developing these guys in the past. So it's almost like the rich get richer with the same kind of prospect. And I'm all for that.
Yeah, and it's not just to develop that type of hitter, it's to develop that type of hitter quickly. Like, we've seen guys just fly through the system that can hit in just a couple of years. Ian Happ was there pretty quick, so was Chris Bryant. And Jorge Soler did not take long either. And they all had great knowledge of the strike zone. And that's probably the hardest thing to teach, that and pitch recognition skills. Those are the hardest things to teach, and Shaw seems to have those down already.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where he gets thrown. Like, I would put my money on Myrtle Beach potentially.
Yeah.
But
I think that'd be fun
to start. Yeah.
Yeah, like, he's going to be a quick ascender. I'm pretty confident of. If he really gets out to a hot start, I don't believe that they'll be cautious with him.
Yeah, it's been a few years since we've had that like college hitter drafted in the first round, that advanced college hitter that then we're like actually watching later in the season, right? We had Jordan Wicks where he made like a couple appearances. We had Cade Horton that was totally shut down. There was no going back on that. And then now we've got Shaw, which is kind of like, not to comp him to like Bryant or Schwarber or Ian Happ. I feel better about that. That's something where you kind of like watch this guy right away or fairly quickly. And so it's going to be more fun, I think, to follow something like that, which is instead of waiting to hear what the pitch lab does in November. We don't really need to do that now. We can do that with maybe some of the other guys they're going to draft, but very exciting.
It'll be interesting to see, like Vinny says, where he goes to start off. But since Myrtle Beach is already in the playoffs, it might be good for him to just go there and get that playoff experience, and then he could start next year at South Bend. So, I think that's an interesting question, and I'm already wondering where I'm going to put him on my prospect list. But I think I'll wait until he plays a while.
I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm trying to piece together. But it looks like Kyle Teal is going to the Red Sox at 14.
All right. That's cool. That's I know everybody was hoping for Teal, and I think that that's completely understandable. They got a guy in Matt Shaw that was several outlets ranked him just about in that same category of hitter. If you aren't sure about Kyle Teal, the catcher, then he's a really good hitter, but like I'm not sure that that's the guy I would have jumped on. No. And that ultimately, like, the most important thing from here is they got pick 1, so that kind of helps establish where they're maybe going. They went a little bit safer, more dependable at pick 13, which I hope, to me, makes me think they're going to be a little bit more aggressive with some of these upside talent. And what I am personally hoping for is they are going to try to get some of this really, really incredible high school infielder talent at a subsequent pick. And that's my goal here.
Well, I think it'll be interesting over the course of the next 2.5 days to see the mix between pitchers and hitters. Last year it was obviously, 3/4 of the draft picks were hitters. And then you had a combo guy, or 3/4 of the picks were pitchers. And then you had a two-way player and then just a few hitters. But it'll be interesting to see how they roll this year, considering, they do have a lot of young international guys that throw hard, that just need to learn basically how to pitch, and they're throwing in the mid-90s. So it'll be interesting to see how many college pitchers they pick or high school pitchers. So seeing those four corner breakdowns will be a lot of fun, I think, at the end of the day on Tuesday.
Yeah, and depending on how much they got Shaw for, pick 68 could be very interesting.
Yes.
Because, maybe Cam Johnson doesn't make it to 68, or maybe not a McGonigal, but Gasparino could be in play. There are some pretty big bats and high school arms once you start dipping into the third, early fourth round. That'll be interesting to watch too.
Yeah, the interesting thing is there's a group of about 40 players in between 60 and 100 that could go anywhere between 60 and 100. If a guy doesn't get taken at 68, odds are he's going to be sitting there at 81 when you pick in the third round tomorrow. So it'll happen quick.
Yeah, like I was telling others today when I was asked how do I feel about this crop in general, the first thing I brought up was there's so many guys the third round and later that we could easily fast forward a year and argue why weren't they in the top 35 picks, top 40 picks.
Yeah.
There is a ton of upside once you really start digging for it. Like a name that comes to mind is Camden Kozel. I love Cam Kozel. Like if you're talking about a very advanced high school hitter that does have some, defensive questions, he looks like he could be an analytic darling half a season in organized ball.
So I actually got up close looks at Camden Kozel. So I'll actually refrain from saying anything too much because I've sent those reports on. But Camden Kozel is a very, very good player. I think he's going to be really intriguing. He's a Vanderbilt commit, but for any of our viewers out there, just if that's not a familiar name, we haven't rattled that one off. But yeah, he's high school infielder, plays shortstop for Millard South, real captain on the field. Absolutely, like on and off, just carries himself like you would imagine somebody who played for USAA baseball, and does it kind of like I said on and off the field. So yeah, that is a really interesting one to watch, because maybe a pick like this where you not only are you saving money, which is like Vinny, you totally mentioned, Todd, you've mentioned, I mentioned, so you're saving a little bit of cash, you got some capital to move. Also, you feel so much more secure that Matt Shaw feels like a major leaguer, and a potentially really good one, with the game and how it's progressing with speed and contact, but also he's got some real pop. So you feel like, we've got Matt Shaw, but now it's like, can we take some gambles here on some guys that might be a little bit trickier to sign? And so I like that, Vinny. I think that's a very fun pick. Very, very fun pick.
And another thing that I noticed this year in particular is we really haven't seen some of the quote unquote underslot guys that are going to fall in the prep ranks commit to their colleges. Besides Adam Hackman, it's been pretty quiet. That's another thing that really sparks my interest, which I think we're going to see some teams really start spending money now in the second and third round if that is the case. Unless we might have a couple guys that pull out here, later on tonight. That could also be possible, but still, they have a plethora of talent available past pick 44 is pretty impressive.
Yeah. So we had a lot of players last year, like but for any of our listeners, we had a lot of players last year that pulled out like that week before. And some pretty big names, like pretty big names. This year we haven't had any. I think like Adam Heckman, like you mentioned, Roman Martin. There's really not a ton. Cassis, who's in college actually as well. I think Gavin Cassis. So that was a little bit of a surprise. But I mean, that's like 6 or 7 names. Is really not a ton compared to last year. I wonder. I think Vinny, you're kind of talking about this, but I'm wondering if Jacob Gonzalez to the White Sox. That's a really good pick.
That's a good pick.
That's a really good pick. Somewhere Tommy Cook is like just had his blood pressure raised and doesn't even know why, because he's been banging the table for Jacob Gonzalez for longer than Tommy Troy. But I think that there's going to be some players that had I got to go on day one or get day one money, and so we might see tomorrow that there's some guys that are like, thanks so much, but I'm going to LSU, Vanderbilt, whatever. So I'm very intrigued how the rest of tonight goes.
Yeah, and we're getting into probably one of the most interesting parts of the draft here is we're seeing all these high school hitters fall. We're seeing Aiden Miller now start to fall. Arjun Namala still hasn't gone yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How? Like, that's something to watch because if you're looking at like mocks and everything, I saw some mock yesterday had Namala fallen to 20, which at the time I was like, all right, that's crazy. Then there was some swing and miss concerns started rumbling around. So maybe that's putting a little life to that. But like, there's some very good talent in the 20s to the 30s. Like Dylan Head, I saw a lot of this year.
Yep.
Absolutely love him. I like him more than Enrique Bradfield. I think he has a higher ceiling than him. I think the body reminds me a lot of early Wander Franco, like a very upper body built type of hitter. Because I saw Franco in 19 when he was a Bowling Green, and watching Dylan Head just absolutely barrel up baseballs this year, it was unbelievable. His speed, unbelievable too. We're talking, I want to see him race Corbin Carroll. I want to see them in a side-by-side race. I don't know who wins that. It's like a close, like, if we're talking about easily a player who falls out of, the top 15 picks that could easily jump next year into a top 10 type of range, like Dylan Head has the tool to do it if he goes to the right team.
I love that. I think that's fun. I still, Vinny, I don't know if you've heard any chatter about this, but I still have him as a guy that, like, especially with like a sub slot deal with the Royals, with Blake Mitchell, not with Dylan Head, that they like overslot to get Dylan Head to fall to them. That's something I had heard somebody pass a comment about, and I was like, ooh, I kind of like that. I flipped it the other way. But yeah, I think that's a really good player to kind of see. I wonder at this point how much buying power Seattle has and how that's affecting things around this range. Because we are getting to the point where you can start adding up. Seattle has 3 picks in the top 30. It's like, oh gosh, I'm blanking on which one their first one is, like 22 or something like that. Yeah. And then 29 and 30. And that's a lot of money. Those are all like about $3+ million plus. And so you start adding up a lot of that money. And I really do wonder if we start to see like them being able to buy down not just 1, but 2 like really premier guys that should have gone in the top 15 or so.
I will say I did see Dylan Head 4 times this year. The teams that I saw the most with scouts there were the Brewers, the Royals, which they passed up on that unless he falls for a buyout, the Braves, and the Seattle Mariners.
All right.
And he also fits. He's pretty much the stereotypical Padres pick too, as everyone's been stating. A nice athletic outfielder that's very consistent with barreling. There's a little ground ball concern, but
he's fast, so that helps. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, he's a very interesting one to watch. Blake Walters also started getting a lot of buzz yesterday in that potential underslot back end of the first CBA pick range. Like, the fastball really plays. The fastball is hard. It's consistent. Command can be shaky at sometimes.
Yeah.
But we're talking, debating on the kind of competition he faced over here in Illinois, like he looked like a college pitcher thrown against high schoolers. Like he's another interesting one to watch. Yeah, like the Hulk and the Mala. Like this is pretty interesting. It's getting into a good part of the draft.
This is going to be really fun. We are going to be heading off here shortly. We're not going to be going all night. Todd, you can run the stream if you want to go all night. But I think we'll be heading off here shortly. But we want to say, first of all, thank you to Vinny.
Yeah.
And before you go, Vinny, just wanted to give everybody a shout out for anybody who tuned in. Don't stop yet, because we have our Jefferson Rojas autograph already ready to go for you. For the folks that went on and quote tweeted the original link with proof that you had subscribed. Just want to let everybody know we randomized the numbers. I have it here for you. I will reach out to you personally, just in case you're not on there. We didn't say you had to attend, though it was always encouraged. And it is Rhino Dino 23 is our winner. And so I will be reaching out to you, Ryan. I know you are always somebody that's on these, and so we really do appreciate it. So you won randomly. We took Huss out of there. So yeah, don't even think about it, Greg. He was not eligible. So outside of him, we made that. And so Ryan, I'm going to be reaching out to you personally. Give me a day or so to get my head straight after the draft. I'm going to be reaching out to you personally, sending you that Jefferson Rojas auto. Just came in the mail. It looks really sweet. So really, really excited for that. But so we'll get to a couple questions, then we'll kind of head off here. But Vinny, any other parting thoughts that you had here? It was fantastic having you on.
Yeah, as I was discussing with a few other people last night, like we're seeing a big shift in the system. We're going from the Cubs, who used to be very buy pitching, develop hitting. We're starting to see a flip to buy hitting, develop pitching. Like we have Jordan Wicks knocking on the door. We have Ben Brown knocking on the door. Bailey Horn should have been up like a month ago, if we want to be honest.
Yeah.
But like the Cubs system in a whole is completely doing a 360 shift, and it's looking really good.
Yeah. I mean,
a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it is. I think we've got a system that, I'd say most, maybe not Baseball America, but a lot of the other publications kind of list them as a top 10 system now. And that's what you'd want, right? Like they haven't been kicking butt and taking names at the major league level. They've had some years that were kind of lean and they had some sell-offs. And so, yeah, like obviously you want them to be building that up. But it is good to see, right? Because there are rebuilds or retools or whatever you want to call it that don't go well. Yeah. And they stay retools or rebuilds for a long time. And so that's not the case, and so hopefully, obviously that's good. But I like your points, Vinny. I think that's fantastic. So, well, Todd, any other questions, comments for Vinny?
Well, I've been following Vinny on Twitter for quite a while, and he's a lot of fun to follow and interact with. And it was a pleasure to finally get to meet you in person and know that your name is Vinny and not down on the farm. So,
well, we don't know. We don't know. Maybe Vinny's a nickname for down in the farm. It could be. For anybody. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. For anybody who doesn't follow him, you really should follow him. I really love your content, and that was why I wanted to reach out and just see chat with you. And this was a really, really good perspective that you brought. I think we think very similarly on some topics, but different than others, which is just fantastic. Makes for great discussion. So thank you, Vinny. This is awesome. We'll have to do this again.
He covers not just the Cubs. He covers all the minors in the draft. So he's got a wide base of knowledge. So I really enjoy his Twitter feed.
Yeah, I try to cover everything as possible, from draft to DSL to lower minors as much as possible. I just can't get enough of it. So if you ever are looking for any kind of, prospect takes or some guy you never heard of, more than likely I've probably talked about him. So,
well, I mad respect over here because I'm trying to follow one team in the draft. So I don't even know how you follow all of them, but tons of respect over there. You do really, really good work. And so, yeah, everybody follow Vinny, and you've had some really good stuff and good content on the Cubs too. So even if you just follow the Cubs, I think he's absolutely worth a follow. If you don't already, correct that mistake here shortly. I think that's great. But Vinny, it was fantastic having you on, man.
It was a pleasure, guys. I thank you. Thank you for having me on. This was really fun.
What?
Yeah. And maybe next year it's even more exciting than this year's.
Well, see, you came on at the perfect time tonight. You came on, the draft was going fast, and the Cubs happened to be picking, so it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, the timing was spectacular with this one.
That's right. We won't have Brian Smith, sick him on you or anything because he got swiped by that. But no, this was great. Vinny, thanks again. Appreciate it. Awesome having you on, man.
Thank you, guys. Hey, have a good rest of your night, and let's hope for something good at 68.
Love it. Let's do it.
I'll be on it.
All right. See you guys.
All right, bye. So, Todd, what are your thoughts, man? I want to hear. I mean, we can chat about it, but I really want to hear your thoughts on Shaw. And curious, man.
Well, to be quite frank, I wanted a little bit bigger bat, but like we said at the top of the show, you're going to get a really good pick tonight, and the Cubs got one, and where he plays is not that important right now. And in getting him at the top at 13, I think really bodes well, but I still want to see where he ends up going this year, because we haven't seen this for a while, and I think that might be the most exciting aspect of the whole thing, is we're going to get to see him play fairly quickly. By the beginning of August, he should be playing. He'll go to Mesa, sign, get his physical, maybe get in 1 or 2 games there, and then away he goes to parts we don't know yet. But I think the Myrtle Beach thing might be best, even though it's not the greatest place for guys to hit for power, but it's also going to be a playoff atmosphere for him.
Mm-hmm.
And what a way to establish a winning tradition than have him, his first pro experience is in a place that's going to be playing for a title right away.
And he's a winning player too. So I was a little soft on Shaw just because I think if you draft him with the intent of, hey, he's a shortstop, hey, he's definitely an infielder, I think you might be a little bit disappointed down the line. But that he could. And he has the athleticism. Like, the athleticism was not something I was concerned about. And then he made that dazzling play, and I was like, well, I'm definitely not concerned about the athleticism. The man has range. Ultimately, I think, second base is a good spot for him. See if that clicks. If not, then center field might even be a good option too. Left field, right field. No. Don't worry about who's still in the system. You want to keep taking good players.
Yeah, there's really no one blocking him at third base on any team. Not even Slaughter and Strumpf at Iowa. I mean, if he can hit, he can hit.
Yeah. So, So I think it's good. We've had some listener questions about, and we'll kind of go back up the chain here just a little bit. We'll probably take the next few minutes, answer these, and then maybe sign off for the night. We got a big night ahead of us still to cover 68, and then get ready for tomorrow.
It's gonna be a late night.
It's gonna be a late night. But do you think this is an underslot pick? This is from Anthony for the Cubs, and are they going to save money for a second round comp pick? Okay, so we don't know, obviously. I would say with how the board lined up, I would imagine the Cubs are getting a little bit of a discount.
Yeah.
I mean, if for nothing else, you can go back and say, the 15th pick is about 400,000 less. Why not lock that money in now? Versus what if Boston or the White Sox aren't interested? You don't have that offer. So I imagine they would. And I think with how there were other talent still on the board, other players that could have been picked, Teal might have actually gotten bought down to Boston at that point. That is a possibility as well. And I think that's something that we probably want to consider. They have a little bit more buying power than the Cubs, just with how the bonus pools are. That, I imagine that Matt Shaw is a little bit of a discount. I don't think he's a deep discount. If he is, great, for the Cubs. I'm not rooting for that for the player. But Todd, what do you think on that?
I don't think he's going to be too far off a full slot value. Maybe 4.4, 4.5. So Brock just went to Milwaukee.
Yeah, I was seeing a bunch of people on that. Oh my.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be full slot. I don't think it's going to be much off that. I think the money they're going to save is probably, we talked about this morning, probably going to be that 4th, 5th, 6th round.
Yeah.
Where they can shave, $1 million or $2 million and get a couple seniors and add on to 68, or we may not just see that this year. I don't know. We'll see, who's going to be available at each spot. We don't know. I mean, 68 is just going to be an interesting pick, and then tomorrow is going to be a free-for-all, the first 13 picks. I mean, everybody's going to have a night to prepare for who's left over, and there are going to be some really good players fly off the board in the 3rd and 4th rounds tomorrow.
Yep, I completely agree. So yeah, I mean, let's see here. I'm trying to make sure that I didn't miss any other questions. We tried to answer them as we go along. This is a non-Cubs question. Interested your thoughts on this, Todd. Do you guys like the draft pick for the Marlins and Noble Meyer? This is also Anthony. Thank you for the questions, Anthony. Understanding the fact that they've struggled in the past years in developing hitters in their system. Yeah. Todd, why don't you jump in on this if you have any thoughts on Noble Meyer to the Marlins?
Yeah, I think he was the top-rated prep pitcher in the class by far. I mean, it wasn't really close. I think I'll get to see him when he gets to Beloit here in a couple of years, but that's an organization known for developing pitchers, and not just developing, pitchers with raw talent, but developing pitchers quickly. Yuri Perez, 20 years old, and I remember seeing him just carve up South Bend in 2021, and he was just vicious. They get pitchers and they throw them, and this is not a knock against the Cubs, but for years going up to Beloit, their pitchers would throw in the Marlins system, I guess just a couple of years, but their pitchers would throw 90 pitches regularly, where the Cubs were pulling their guys a little after 75 or sometimes 80 pitches. But it was nothing to see a Miami system pitcher, throw 100 pitches. So he's going to develop pretty quickly. They're going to develop that arm strength. They're going to develop his command, which he already has a pretty good command of his pitches at just 18 years old.
That's a really interesting point that actually I wasn't super familiar with, Todd. So I that's illuminating. So with Noble Meyer being a cold weather arm, somebody coming from Oregon, which we would consider like a cold weather state, their high school games start a little bit later. Not a lot of mileage on that arm. He played in some pretty premier events, and so he probably played more than the average Oregon pitcher. But that will be interesting to see how he adapts to that new kind of pro style, and especially for the Marlins. If I wanted to, I think it's a good pick. I know they really loved him. The people that met Noble Meyer at the Combine, and I think Joe Doyle's reported on this, a couple other people reported, loved him. They just were so enamored and impressed with him as a person, as a pitcher, as a knowledge basis as a pitcher. So I could totally see them geeking out on that and kind of being like, this is what we do well, and he gets it.
Yeah.
So, that makes a lot of sense. If I had to pick who would they have even taken as a hitter? Ironically, Matt Shaw is probably the guy that would have made the most sense for them, because he's somebody you don't need to do a lot of development with. There's probably some adjustments and maybe getting him to chase a little bit less, but it's not really a lot that you need to do from a hitting development standpoint. You certainly don't need to retool his swing.
No.
And so that's why Enrique Bradfield Jr., I backed off on that connection a while ago, because they love outfielders. He needs a retooled swing.
Oh my God.
Baltimore retool swings. They took him.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, as for number 13, I think you could have gotten a really good bat instead of Bradfield, and the Cubs did. They went out. To be honest, they got the best bat on the board and probably the closest one to the professional ranks. I saw somebody in the chat room compared him to Zach Nato, and that's not a bad comp, I don't think.
Yeah, that's from a hitting side. That's not a bad comp at all. They do things differently, but I like that. I mean, they make similar levels of contact. Actually, really similar. I'm trying to remember the numbers, but it's like within like 2 percentage points. I'm pretty sure it's like 83% on Zach Neto and like 81% on Matt Shaw. So that's extremely close. I don't have the chase numbers from last year, so I couldn't tell you on Neto. I don't think he chased too much. The power's about the same. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think Shaw is going to go right to AA where Nato went. But little Greg Huss asks, says he's thinking he may get some Myrtle Beach time this year. I think that's definitely true.
I think that's a great call.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think, Todd, you mentioned that first, and I really like that. I actually wasn't even sure, but that, to me, with the playoffs coming up, with just getting his feet wet, I mean, spending the rest of the summer, and I think he'll be a relatively quick sign. I could be totally wrong on that. I have no inside information, but I just, judging from how this went, I think he'll be a relatively quick sign. Get him out there, spend the summer at Myrtle Beach, like with the guys, some of the people that you're going to be playing with long term. I think that's really, really fun.
Yeah, and if South Bend catches fire, who knows? You might
could be exciting. But we do know the birds are hot. And we might have another bird flocking their way to Myrtle Beach, and that is Matt Shaw. So that it could be very, very fun to watch this summer.
And it's so much fun to think that, oh my God, we're going to have a hitter and we're going to get to see him right away, the top pick. And we haven't had that for a long time.
Yeah, that's good. Well,
I mean, when was the last? Let's see, we had Little, Jensen. Who was in 19? Nico? No, Nico.
Nico. So Chase Strumpf was the second rounder in 19, but it was Ryan Jensen in 2019. 2018 was Nico.
There we go.
And he started off in Eugene.
Yeah.
RIP. I mean, they still exist, but they're not a Cubs affiliate. And it crushed me when they no longer were, because then I couldn't go an hour to a Cubs affiliate. But he played there, and then got a little bit of time in, I think it was South Bend.
Yeah, I stood next to him for 4 games while he was injured.
That's right. Didn't he like hurt his elbow? He like landed, slid weird. It was something strange. Yeah.
He did it the same day. Well, Evan Altman and I were both at South Bend that day, and Nico had hit a homer. And then I forgot what he did.
Yeah, he did something where it's like slid into the base, and then they were just like, he's just like the year. It's not serious, but yeah. But yeah, no, I think that could be really fun. So it's been a while. He is not Nico Horner. That's a very different player, very different player. But yeah, I mean, we saw how successful the Cubs have been at drafting college hitters. There's really not one in the last 10 plus years from the first round. And we got a long way to go in the draft. I think they're going to be more aggressive. They got to do more than just get the first round right. That's the difference here. They got to do better than that, and they have been. But they've got a good track record developing hitters. So yeah, this is a good one. This is really exciting, and I am ready to go, and I'm excited. So Todd,
we need to thank all our fans for
absolutely.
For coming to see us and also reading our website today. It was the busiest day ever in Northside Bound history. Less than 2 years now. So thank you all for coming to see us here on YouTube, and also for reading our work on Northside Bound, as we got to see them add a number 1 draft pick today.
Absolutely. They did indeed, and a hitter we're going to follow. So we will be, we're not coming back on this show. Arjun Namala to the Blue Jays. Fun. That's exciting. Blue Jays will, last minute here, but like Blue Jays take a lot of guys that kind of fall in the draft. I think that's a really fun one that they could have. So go Arjun. I really love him as a player and as a person. So I think that's really exciting. But all right.
Thank you, guys.
Big night ahead of us. Stay tuned to Northside Bound. We're going to have a ton of coverage, more coverage than you could possibly imagine. I am going to go upstairs, get a little bit of water, recenter my brain so that we can kind of dive into some of these players. I'll be available probably on Twitter. Hit me up, Todd, as well. But thanks so much. And then Ryan, I'm going to be hitting you up here in the next couple of days, making sure we can get you that Jefferson Rojas auto. If you are not already following Northside Bound on YouTube, please do, because we are going to be doing some of these fun maybe giveaways or promotions just to kind of drum up interest. We'd love to build this community on there. I think we have a lot of good fun. So please make sure to take care of that if you want to, but I highly recommend it. I'm biased. But otherwise, I'm Greg Zumack. I am joined by the great Todd Johnson. And day one, let's keep it rolling.
I can leave the basement now. Yay.
Yay. That's right.
Thanks for
All
coming.
right, everybody.
Bye.
Go Cubs.